I'm aware that you're all waiting for lunch, and I am the last person between you and your lunch, so I do apologise. I'll make it as painless as possible. So, that's a very generic job term, isn't it? Mental health specialist. What does that mean? So I'm actually a social worker by background. I used to be an approved mental health professional, means I used to detain people under the Mental Health Act. I'm also a trained best interest assessor, and I'm not going to answer all your questions today. No, I'm quite happy to answer questions. She says. No, I'm very passionate about MCA. But today I'm not talking about MCA or the Mental Health Act. Well, I am talking about parts of the Mental Health Act because I felt this more aligned into what we were talking about today, which is about ADHD. So there's a new piece of legislation that's come out called the Mental Health Unit Uses of Force Act 2018. What the government always like to do, the act only actually came into force last year, March, but they put the year in that it came through to Parliament and that they passed it. So that's why it says 2018. So as I said, I'm Shirley and I'm going to go through my role a bit. So it is a bit generic. So some of you will probably, I recognise some of you sat in here because you'll see me drifting onto your wards. I can see B3 representing at the back, I'm always there. I can see Stuart and I can see Vicky who doesn't ever remember who I am. And she literally said the words to me, I forget you exist. So I thought I'd do a presentation today so she would remember who I am. And obviously I know Sharon and some of the health and safety team as well. So my role has been present for about a year. There was a mental health matron who's a nurse by background in my role for a few months before I came into place. So I fall under safeguarding as a directorate and I sit within the safeguarding team. Obviously you should all know that we've got an adults and children's and the midwifery safeguarding team and I'm a team of me who sits within the safeguarding team. So my role I think was created because of the level of mental health assessments we have in the hospital and making sure the legal use of the Mental Health Act, and I define the word legal use of the Mental Health Act is legal, and we're detaining people correctly, and we're using the right bit of legislation, we're ensuring that the paperwork is going to the right places and being processed properly and in a timely fashion. So I now look after all the kind of detention, so to speak, and the legal processes of that. If there's any other issues with that, you can always contact me. But within that role, I'm kind of taking the lead, I suppose, within mental health at NUH, because mental health obviously falls under the directorate of the head of safeguarding, who's Rebecca Selwyn. But I'm updating the detained persons policy, I'm updating some more strategies, and obviously looking at any other bits of legislation that have to do with us. I'm also the vice chair of the BAME staff network here at NUH, which is going to make a bit more sense when I talk about the presentation we're going through, because I wanted to kind of focus on this a bit more. So as I said, relevant NUH policies and to offer support and education training. So that's someone mentioned training. I'm tasked with training. Now it's a difficult one because as you all know, there's Capacity Act training, that's mandatory training that you've all got, that I don't get really involved in that. I do Mental Health Act training. However, I think some of you areas directorates are going to be coming to some of the training I'm doing, the ward managers and matrons. And that's so that more people can be involved with the understanding of the detention paperwork. But I am tasked to roll out mental health training to everyone, but one thing at a time, if you just give us a chance. So look at this beautiful, beautiful young lad here. This is Senny Lewis. Now, I'm going to try and get through this without blubbing, because I watched the video his mum made of this, and it sent me all over the edge, so I'll try not to do it today. This lovely, lovely young man was 23, and I said 2010 because this was a few years ago, but as you can see, the legislation was only passed in 2018. It was a massive, long journey for his family. So he was 23, as it says here. This happened down in South London, and actually I used to work at the Royal Bethlehem, so I know this place well. And he had his first psychotic episode, and I think that's really important because this guy didn't have a long history of mental health. He didn't have a long history of mental disorders. Now he's in the right age group for his first acute psychotic episode. So he was taken, his parents, bless him, really upset, really worried about their son, who they recognised symptoms, he's not well. Let's take him to the local psychiatric hospital, just as you would if your family member hurt their leg, you'd take them to us to get treated. They took him to the local psychiatric hospital, And he seemed to have become, when they had to leave because they had other children at home, he was in a psychiatric hospital, they felt he was safe, he became quite agitated and he became quite upset. So I read the coroner's reports with this. And once they left, I think the staff got a bit worried and a bit concerned about calming him down. So they called the police. And the police came, and I'm quite aware as an officer at the back, so I do apologise if I'm going through this a bit. But as a social worker, we are used to being in kind of new stuff. So the police came, and there was 11 officers who put him in the prone position. I think people are aware what prone is, face down. He was held in that position for 40 minutes, and he was held and suffered a cardiac arrest, and then was taken to the local A&E. So he was then, the coroner's inquest on the 9th of May 2017, which is a pretty substantial amount of time since 2010, as you can see, concluded that Mr. Lewis died from hypoxic brain injury caused by restraint in association with acute behavioural disturbance. So according to the coroner, the staff lacked the training to deal with Seni's agitation, and although there was no allegation that he attacked anyone, they called the police. And as I said, the prone position for 40 minutes. They held him for that until he could no longer breathe and he suffered a heart attack. He was taken to the local A&E hospital and was in a coma for 4 days before passing. The coroner criticised Seni's treatment as disproportionate and unreasonable. No patient entering a hospital for care, and to me, the psychiatric or physical hospital, it's all the same. Oh gosh, I've lost my place, I apologise. Should be taken to care, it took to disproportionate and unreasonable. No patient entering a hospital for care should suffer and die in a way that Seni did. It took 7 years of rejecting and campaigning by Seni's parents. So when they first objected to his death, as in going with the police and going through, it wasn't really picked up, but then they got the local MP involved. I think it was Stephen Reed down south, Croydon, who actually passed this legislation through government. They lobbied to him, and then it got reopened up, and I think the IPCC looked into this further. So once that happened in 2017, the coroner found severe failings with the police and the mental health services, and she gave a stark warning that there is a risk that future deaths will occur unless action is taken. So yes, it was Stephen Reed, I was right. So this isn't an isolated event. So the reason I'm picking up on that, because what happens to Seni happens to lots of psychiatric patients. Now we're talking about restraint today. So we're talking about kind of how people are held. So between 2000 and 2014, 46 mental health patients died in restraint. It doesn't say specifically where, but that's looking at the stats from kind of national reviews. So I thought somebody just said something. So there are fears about unconscious bias in mental health. So the Angola report notes that a disproportionate number of Black and Asian and ethnic minority communities have died after the use of force in custody more generally. We need to understand the extent to which assumptions based on stereotypes are causing that, but we do so and need standardised data to record this. So I've added some statistics. These are all government statistics. I've not just made up these statistics. They're on mine, they're readily available on the internet. And to me, this is important because if we're looking at trends and we're looking at this legislation, why is it come into effect? Because these numbers do exist. So in the year of March 2022, Black people were almost 5 times as likely as white people to be detained under the Mental Health Act. Now, when I qualified, it was 20 years ago, I know, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know, like it. We were told that was 4 times, and that statistic has just gone up, is my point. So over the years, this statistic's gone up more. So 342 detentions for every 100,000 people compared to 72 for every 100,000 people from other ethnic minority groups. So I won't read through all these statistics, but detentions count the year of March 2022, so only a year ago, 0.2 higher than those for previous years. So we're just seeing a trend that's going up. So healthcare professionals are more than 4 times more likely to detain Black people than white people, and 4 times more likely to restrain or hold Black people in isolation while in hospital. And that is something, again, that is being looked at with studies, and a bit, I suppose it's kind of how we are looking at that as well. So what does this mean to NUH? Why am I getting up here about talking about this? So when I say what does it mean to NUH, what does it mean to me to have to ensure that we're doing as a hospital and what we're rolling out? So as I said, the legislation came into force in March 2022. So the government says within this, so the legislation says in section 2, we need to have a responsible person employed by the trust who governs all detained people. We were looking at this piece of legislation. So that's either going to be our medical director or be our chief nurse. Have a policy in the use of force. This is currently something I'm creating. There must be publication within the trust of information about rights of patients in relation to the use of force. Now, as you will probably be aware, anybody that you have a detained patient, I will probably come and give your patient, or you'll see me send to you information on their rights if they're detained. So under section 2 or 3 of the Mental Health Act, we should all be giving them information on these are your rights when you're detained. We're looking at, so Knox Healthcare very kindly gave me what they give their patients. Obviously they're using restraint a lot more than us under the Act. So I'm going to add something along that so we're able to tell people that if they're coming into our hospitals and we're using them under mental health, that you've been detained, you may also be subject to restraint. Restraint, by the way, can I just make clear, for this Act includes physical isolation and chemical restraint. So when we're giving someone medication just for the purposes of calming them down, not for the purposes of alleviating any of their mental disorder, it's just for that purpose. That is chemical restraint. So there must be publication, sorry, I just said that, provide appropriate training to staff. And I think that's where we talk about restraint training. And as most people here know, psychiatric hospitals, as something we were just talking about a minute ago, they provide that as mandatory training. So when I've worked associated with psychiatric hospitals, I've always had to do mandatory restraint training. But that's, even if I wasn't doing face-to-face, that's just mandatory. So this differs. This is what the law says. It's not all specific to us as an acute hospital. So I am clarifying whether I don't think that's specific to us. So just to make that clear. So this is the main thing for me, is to record the use of any force. So when we're restraining someone, now also, because I cover children's, adults and older adults, and it's something that I mentioned quite a few times in children's. If we're using, because we do physically restrain children who are detained under the Mental Health Act, we're forcing, say, feeds and G tubes, we need to be doing body maps if we're doing that, because I think it's just safe for that person. It's safe for, I don't know if actually body cams are going to be in the children's areas. That's an interesting conversation. So that needs to be recorded, basically. We've recorded how long we're putting someone in restraint, the frequency of that restraint, and why we've done that restraint. And that's including chemical restraint. So we can't just be sticking a tablet into someone, that PRN, every, 30 minutes. Why are we giving that person that restraint? For how long are we giving that person that restraint? So the Act is applicable to mental health units and types of inpatient services considered within the definition of the mental health unit. I won't go through the whole definition, but the law basically says, so the Mental Health Act excludes, you can't be detained in A&E. 135 is basically it's a warrant, and the 136, and outpatients or clinics and transport. So it's the same as the Mental Health Act, but on our wards is basically where it's, that's where it will work and where we're using it. So it is worth noting, that we're talking about formal and informal admissions. So when we have a patient who sat on our ward for a long time waiting for that psychiatric bed, they're i.e. an informal patient. Because what's happened is DPM, or someone has said, this person needs to go over to Highbury, Sherwood Oaks, wherever it is, but they're agreeing to wait. So that's I would classify that person at that point an informal patient for mental health. So that's somebody, and if we're restraining that person, we need to make sure that's being recorded. Well, there's my references, because I thought that's what you had to submit. No, you're not. And that's what a nerd I am. I do references even on my presentations. But I just thought if any of you wanted to watch it, I mean, the video, the mum on The Guardian, they've done like a whole art piece. There's a whole, it is really interest. Mum's a lawyer, I think, by background, and she speaks really well. But it is I found it a really emotive case following it. It's quite an interesting case. But is there any questions anyone has? I don't know if I'm on.
Sorry, when you are viewing recognising people using drug medication from chemical restraints, is it worth considering maybe having an audit in place on each individual ward to recognise when it's been used, what was done prior, what was done post, so we can evidence that it was done as the least restrictive practice rather than being done because it's easier to do that?
We are looking at processes and how we're using it. No, don't apologise. Yeah, we are looking at processes and how we're using it, what's the best way to implement it. So I am in conversations with people around the hospital about the best process and how to use this. Because obviously we're not just talking one ward, we're rolling this out across the whole of NUH. So yeah, it is, but thank you for that. Is there any other questions? I feel like I got off lightly. You got all the questions.
Do we still have a 136 suite there?
Your office is right next to me, you have to ask this here. No, apparently someone else can say it's different. We got rid of our 136 suite, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, someone else told me that, yes, thanks Stuart. Yeah, they got, I think, yeah, so there is 2 at Highbury, because I did a tour of Highbury a couple of weeks ago. So they've got 2 rooms that they use for anyone detained. And people are aware of what 136 is. Sorry. So 136 is the police power under the Mental Health Act to detain somebody who is seemingly acting with a mental disorder, basically, and they require treatment, a place of safety to be assessed under the Mental Health